My therapist tells me to tell the truth. The whole truth. But the truth isn't a straight line. The truth is a cliff, and I've spent 20 years on the edge. There are things I haven't told you. Things I omitted on purpose, with the same precision a translator uses to choose one word and discard another. Because that's what translating is, deciding what gets said and what gets silenced. And I've spent 4 chapters translating a version of events for you that isn't false, but isn't true either. Not today. Today I'm going to tell you what I didn't tell. What Vera doesn't tell. My father's name was Amoro Duvel. He was a fishing captain in Terra, which in Galician means what it means, the end of the earth. The last place before the world runs out. There are people who think that's sad. My father thought it was a privilege. To live where everything ends. Where there's no choice but to look at the sea because behind you there's nothing left. He was a quiet man. Not out of shyness or lack of things to say, but because he believed words were like bait. Use too much and you scare the fish. He spoke little and listened much. He smelled of salt even on Sundays, when he didn't go out to fish. As if the sea had gotten inside him and no longer knew how to leave. He taught me to read the tides. He'd sit me on the dock when I was 5 and say, "Look, Vera, the sea has languages. When it drops slowly, with fine foam, it's calm. When it rises fast and the foam is thick, it's thinking about something. And when there's no foam and the water looks like oil, that's when you need to be careful. Because the sea at calm is the sea making decisions." My father read the sea the way I read books. With patience. With respect. Knowing that what matters is never on the surface. We had a small house on the upper part of the village. From my bedroom window you could see the harbor. Every morning, before dawn, my father walked down the stone path in his rubber boots and the blue sweater my mother knitted for him every autumn. Always the same sweater. Always blue. As if it were a uniform, or a promise. I'd lean out the window and watch him grow smaller in the fog, and I was never afraid. Because he always came back. Every morning he left and every evening he returned, and that was as certain as the tide. Until it wasn't. On the 15th of November my father left at 4 in the morning. I know because I woke up. I don't know why. There was no noise, no light. But something woke me. Like when you dream you're falling and open your eyes before hitting the ground. Something like that. A jolt without origin. I leaned out the window. I saw him walking down the path. The blue sweater, the boots, the bag with the lunch my mother prepared every night. He walked slowly, as always. But that morning he stopped halfway. He turned. He looked toward the house. Toward my window. He couldn't have seen me. It was dark and I hadn't turned on the light. But he stood looking. 3 seconds. 4. As if he knew I was there. As if he wanted to keep that image. Then he kept walking. And the fog swallowed him. That was the last of it. There was no goodbye. There were no final words. There was nothing I could keep for the days that came after, when all I wanted was one sentence, a single sentence from him, something to serve as an anchor. Only his back moving away. The blue sweater dissolving into the grey. The first night nobody slept. Nobody in Terra slept when a boat didn't return. The women gathered at the harbour with blankets and thermoses of coffee. The men stared at the horizon as if by staring hard enough they could make a sail appear. My mother didn't go to the harbour. She stayed in the kitchen, sitting, hands on the table. She didn't pray. She didn't cry. She just waited. With that terrible patience of women who already know but need someone to confirm it. The second day the sea gave back 2 bodies. They weren't my father. They were Zos Largo and Manuel Brea, the youngest of the crew. They were found on the beach at Langostera, face down, as if the sea had laid them down carefully and then receded. They had no visible wounds. only blue-tinged skin and open eyes. The third day, 2 more. On the rocks at O Semaforo. Destroyed. The sea isn't always gentle. The 4th day, my father appeared. They found him on Praia do Mar de Fora, at dawn, as if the sea had taken him on a long walk and returned him in time for breakfast. He was whole. No marks. Eyes closed. As if sleeping. As if the sea, with my father, had decided to be kind. They asked me to identify him. I am 18 years old. I'm in a room that smells of bleach and something sweet I don't want to name. There is a stainless steel table. On the table there is a green sheet. Under the sheet is my father, but I don't fully know it yet, because as long as the sheet is there, I can pretend it's someone else. That the sea made a mistake. That it returned the wrong man. An official asks if I'm ready. I say yes. I lie. Nobody is ready for this. But I nod because my mother couldn't come and someone has to say, yes, that's a moro double. Someone has to turn it into a fact. They pull back the sheet to the shoulders. And there he is. My father. Paler than he ever was in life, with his lips slightly parted, as if he were about to tell me something. Something important. Something the sea didn't let him finish. What destroyed me wasn't seeing him dead. What destroyed me was that he smelled of salt. Just like always. As if death hadn't been able to take that from him. As if the only thing left of my father was what the sea had given him. I said, yes, it's him. And I walked out. And I didn't cry. I didn't cry until 3 weeks later, alone, in my room, at 4 in the morning, at the exact hour he used to go out to fish. I cried until dawn. Then I washed my face, went down to the kitchen, and started asking questions. The official investigation lasted 45 days. 45 days for 6 dead men. The final report fit in 12 pages. Navigation error in adverse weather conditions. Case closed. Minimum compensation. Silence. I didn't accept it. My mother did. Not because she believed it, but because she had no strength left not to believe it. Accepting the official version was easier than fighting it. Easier than getting up every morning and continuing to search for a truth nobody wanted to find. My mother faded slowly. It wasn't an illness or an accident. It was exhaustion. The exhaustion of living without him. The exhaustion of waking up every day in a house that smelled of salt but no longer had anyone to bring it home. She died 5 years later. The certificate says heart failure. I say she died of being tired of living. I was alone at 23. No parents, no siblings, no one to tie me to Fisterra. I went to Santiago. I studied translation. I learned English, perfected my Galician, found work at a publishing house. By day I translated novels. Mystery novels, mostly. The irony wasn't lost on me. At night I worked on the file. It started as a showbox. Newspaper clippings, photocopies of the official report I'd obtained by insisting at the courthouse, 2 testimonies from fishermen who didn't want to give their names. It was nothing. Any grieving daughter would have done the same. But I wasn't just any daughter. I was the daughter of a man who read the sea and who taught me that what matters is never on the surface. The showbox became a folder. The folder became a filing cabinet. The filing cabinet became 20 years. Every night, after dinner, I opened the filing cabinet and worked. Maritime records. Cargo manifests. Press articles. Court records. Testimonies I collected in person, traveling on weekends, talking to widows, retired fishermen, harbor officials who drank too much and remembered more than they should. I learned to read legal documents. I learned what each naval registration code meant. I learned how smuggling worked on the Costa da Morte in the 90s. The packages that arrived in speedboats were transferred to local fishing boats, and unloaded at small ports where the Guardia Civil looked the other way. And I learned that the Santa Lucia wasn't just any boat. It was the boat that was going to break the chain. Because my father had discovered what they were carrying in the nets. And my father was going to report it. It took me 12 years to confirm that. 12 years to find a former dock worker who told me, drunk in a bar in Muros, that everyone knew about a Morro Devil. That he was going to go to the police. That someone found out. That night, the night of the 15th of November, it wasn't an accident. And it took me 8 more years to gather the names. One by one. Like someone pulling a thread knowing that at the end there's a knot, and behind the knot there's a net, and behind the net there's a monster. 7 names. 7 people connected to that night. The keeper who turned off the light. The journalist who buried the story. The psychologist who closed the case. The lawyer who protected the guilty. The son of a crewman. The daughter of the fleet owner. And me. The daughter of the dead man. I followed Hugo Eriot for months. I watched him go in and out of his law firm in Madrid, in his €3,000 suits and his steel watch gleaming under the streetlights on the Castellana. I watched him dine in restaurants where a bottle of wine cost more than my father's monthly wage. I watched him laugh. And every time I watched him laugh, I felt something cold and precise sharpening inside me. It wasn't hatred. It was patience. The same patience my father had with the sea. Lola was watching me from the lantern room window. The beam of light turned behind us, slow, methodical, slicing the night into regular portions. Below, the storm kept punishing the cliffs with a constancy that no longer seemed natural. It seemed personal. I brought them here, I said. It wasn't hard to say. I'd been preparing for that sentence for 20 years. What was hard was what came after, Lola's silence. A long, heavy silence that smelled of salt and motor oil and 20 years of penance locked inside 30 meters of stone. The invitations. The shell company. The exclusive retreat. It was all me. I hired the catering service through an agency so no one could trace me. I sent the invitations 2 months in advance, personalized, so each one would think they'd been invited for a different reason. For Roman, I offered an exclusive. For Celia, a conference on forensic psychology in coastal settings. For Hugo, a real estate business opportunity. For Martin, a chef position for a gastro retreat. For Inns, a photography project. Lola still hadn't spoken. She stared at the sea as if the sea could give her the answers I wasn't providing. I wanted the truth, I said. Just the truth. I wanted to sit them in a room and make them look at what they did. I wanted someone to say out loud what I've been saying quietly for 20 years. That my father didn't die in an accident. That he was killed. That all of them helped kill him. Pause. I didn't want anyone to die, Lola. I swear. Lola turned slowly. The lighthouse beam crossed her face and for a second I saw something I didn't expect. It wasn't anger. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. As if she'd been waiting 20 years for someone to come and tell her exactly that. The sea doesn't understand intentions, child, she said. And her voice sounded so old, so laden with salt and sleepless nights, that it seemed like the voice of the lighthouse itself. I stood before her, with the wind howling outside and the metal structure trembling like a bone. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt the weight shift. It didn't disappear. It shifted. Like a tide changing direction. It was still there, but it was no longer pushing the same way. My father read the sea, I told her. I don't know why. It wasn't relevant. But I needed someone in that lighthouse to know that. That before being a name in a report, before being a body on a steel table, before being the reason a 38-year-old woman would end up locked in a psychiatric ward, a Morro Devil was a man who read the sea and who smelled of salt on Sundays. Lola nodded. I know, she said. I saw him many times from up here. He went out before anyone else. First in the water, last to return. And the night I turned off the light, his boat was the last one to disappear from the radar. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. The two of us stood there looking at the storm, a mother who chose her son and the daughter of a man who died for that choice, and between us there was neither forgiveness nor hatred nor anything that had a name. Only the sea. Only the wind. Only the light turning. I went down to my room just before dawn. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired either. I was empty. Like after vomiting. That false lightness that doesn't last. I opened the door. I knew before turning on the light. Something had changed in the room's air. A minimal displacement, like when you move a heavy piece of furniture and the whole room readjusts around the gap. I turned on the lamp. The file wasn't there. I'd left it under the mattress. A ridiculous hiding place, I know. But I'd spent 20 years keeping it under mattresses, in false bottoms of wardrobes, in boxes labeled invoices. You get used to hiding the things that matter to you in places no one would look twice. I lifted the mattress. Nothing. I looked under the bed, in the wardrobe, behind the nightstand. Nothing. The file was gone. 20 years of investigation. Records, testimonies, connections, evidence. Everything I had. Everything I was. Someone had entered my room while I was in the lantern with Lola. Someone had searched, found, and taken the only thing connecting me to the truth. Someone knew who I was. Someone knew what I was doing. And now they had the evidence. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. The storm beat against the windows with a regularity that sounded like a clock. And for the first time since I arrived at the lighthouse, I was afraid. Not the abstract fear of knowing there was a dead man on the floor above. Real fear. Fear in the flesh. Because whoever has that file knows what I know. And whoever knows what I know has reasons to make sure I never tell it. 20 years. 20 years searching for the truth. And now the truth was in the hands of someone who had every reason to destroy it. The sea, on the other side of the window, said nothing. But it kept pounding. Patient. Constant. As if it had been waiting 20 years for this moment. As if it knew exactly what was going to happen. The next chapter will be released when we reach 50. 50 people who know what's happening in this lighthouse. Subscribe. Because now you know who I am. You know what I did. You know why. But you still don't know who has my file. And believe me, that changes everything.